So what do we do?
I think this book might be important. Look, it's Van Helsing's diary. But I can't read it. It's all in German.
My sister takes German in high school.
Sister doesn't speak German. All she does is hang around and let guys touch her tits.
So let me get this straight. You telling me there was this 2,000-year-old mummy here, right?
Yes, sir. 2,000-year-old dead guys do not get up and walk away by themselves.
Look, I know this will sound pretty stupid, but a mummy disappeared in the museum tonight.
Yeah, what the hell's Monster Squad?
It's us. We're the Monster Squad. I think there's monsters, like real ones. I heard my dad talking on the telephone to a guy down at the police station. There was a guy screaming he was a werewolf.
Cuffs on him. I got it.
Van Helsing's diary is missing. Children possess it. I want you to find them and take the diary. If they do not cooperate, you can kill them.
Every 100 years, at the stroke of midnight, the amulet becomes vulnerable, and at that moment it can be shattered.
And if it is?
And the balance between good and evil will shift, and evil will rule.
100 years ago? Tomorrow night?
Come and get it.
We're the Monster Squad.
The Monster Squad hit US theatres in August of 1987 and made its way to the UK in December of that year. Produced for a modest budget of $12 million, it sadly bombed at the box office and pulled in a measly $3.7 million. After a 2-week theatrical run, the movie was pulled from theatres. The critics were sadly mixed on it at the time. The New York Times called it a silly attempt to crossbreed an hour gang comedy with a classic horror film, which usually means that both genres have reached the end of the line. While the LA Times wrote that you can never regain childhood innocence, you can find compensation in being able to appreciate the artistry with which director Fred Dekker and co-writer Shane Black have brought to this horror comedy adventure aimed at youngsters. Most critics praised the special effects by Richard Edlund's company Boss Film, and the monster makeup effects created by Stan Winston and his team. Despite the film's failure at the box office, it eventually found its audience when it came to cable TV and home video. The kids who were too young to see it in cinemas could now finally enjoy it, and it became a cult classic and to this day has a strong following. To celebrate its 30th anniversary, the star of the film, Andre Gower, directed his own documentary called The Wolfman's Got Nards, which is currently doing the rounds at film festivals, and he was recently interviewed for the documentary In Search of Darkness. Director Fred Dekker in his youth wanted to be a filmmaker, and when he had the opportunity to further his studies to realise his career, he applied for USC and UCLA, but both rejected him to be part of the film department. But USC accepted him into their curriculum, and he pursued a bachelor's degree in English. He felt that being an English major was kind of a nuisance, because he wanted to hang out with his friends and make movies. Fred really wanted to direct, and came up with the idea of a horror film, which would end up being called House. He sold the story to producer Sean Cunningham, and the film would end up being directed by Steve Miner. Now in the position to pursue his movie career, he set about writing a script based around all the things he loved, horror, science fiction, and mixed them together with many B-movie elements, which he titled Night of the Creeps. This time he got his chance to direct. As he was filming Night of the Creeps, he started developing a new idea based around the classic monster movies. He wanted to combine the Little Rascals with the Universal monster characters. The film was aimed to be a love letter to those classics he grew up watching. His college friend Shane Black, who had just written Lethal Weapon, showed an interest in helping Dekker with his script. Shane initially wanted a far more overblown opening sequence. He envisioned Van Helsing laying siege to Dracula's castle on a zeppelin with machine guns. Racing out to meet him would be 400 vampire brides riding horses. Dekker, knowing this would be impossible to achieve, told Shane his idea would cost in a region of $100 million to put on film. Shane's contributions to the script brought much of the family dynamic to the film, particularly the father being a cop and the effect it had on the rest of the family, and the humour we've come to know from Shane is present throughout. Fred Dekker had the opportunity to meet director and producer Peter Hyams. Fred loved his movies such as Capricorn 1 and pitched the Monster Squad idea to him, and he loved it, and his script was sent to producer Rob Cohen. Rob, just like Peter, loved the idea and gave it the go-ahead. In a shameless plug, you'll notice the words "Go Monster Squad" graffitied onto the bathroom wall in Night of the Creeps, as the film was green-lit when he was shooting. Night of the Creeps sadly didn't get a wide release and failed to find a profit, but this didn't affect his role on the Monster Squad, as Rob Cohen saw a lot of potential in Fred Dekker. As the film contained Universal classic monsters, they went to Universal Pictures first to get a distribution deal, as this would gain them the rights to use the characters, but the studio wasn't interested. Dekker felt the studio didn't appreciate their value. The film would end up being picked up by TriStar Pictures. With Universal Pictures not on board, the makeup effects team would have to get creative. The cast for the Monster Squad is pretty big, with a lot of characters at play within the script. With the film focusing on a group of pre-teens, many of the young cast had been acting since an early age and popped up in many popular TV shows and even films. For example, Andre Gower, who plays as Sean, the head of the Monster Squad, starred in The A-Team, Knight Rider and TJ Hooker. Robbie Kiger, who was friends with Andre in real life, plays as Patrick, starred in Children of the Corn. Michael Faustino, who stars as Eugene, appeared in Suburban Commando, Blank Check and popped up in the TV show Married with Children. Ryan Lambert stars as Rudy, the young lad who looks like he stepped out of the 1950s, had a number of roles in TV shows such as the popular Kids Incorporated. He was a teen idol at the time and returned to acting in the last few years, appearing in a number of short films. Ashley Bank plays as Phoebe, Sean's younger sister. She also popped up in many popular sitcoms and returned to acting a decade later, starring in the show Paranormal Burbank. Sadly, Brent Shalem, who plays as Horace, also referred to as the Fat Kid, died at the age of 22 in 1997 due to suffering from pneumonia. Brent quit acting in 1989 and moved into studying law at the time of his death. As you can see from the majority of them, they took a break from acting come the early 90s as they got older and focused on their education. If they then decided to return to the business, they didn't quite have the same success as we've seen time and time again with many child actors. For Sean's parents, we have the late Mary Ellen Trainor as the mother Emily. Mary is a familiar face, popping up as the mother in The Goonies. She had supporting roles in Die Hard and the Lethal Weapon franchise. Stephen Macht is Sean's father Dell, a detective who leads up the investigation into the monster sightings. Stephen still acts steadily today, with his career mainly focused on TV. We have Stan Shaw as Detective Rich, Dell's partner. Stan has had a steady career on TV and film, starring in many familiar movies such as Harlem Nights, Daylight and the box office disaster Cutthroat Island. Lisa Fuller plays as Lisa, Patrick's sister. This will be her first film. She went on to star in a few TV shows such as Freddy's Nightmare, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and the film Baby Boom. She stopped working in the business in 1994 and did return to acting in 2008 for a short movie. The late Leonardo Cimino plays as the scary German guy. He had been acting since the late 40s. He has starred in many movies that are now cult favourites such as Dune, Hudson Hawk and Waterworld. For the monsters, Duncan Regier stars as Count Dracula. This role was originally intended for Liam Neeson, who auditioned for the part, but Duncan came in and blew them all away with his interpretation of the popular character. Duncan was a big star of TV, appearing in V, Zorro and Star Trek Deep Space Nine. His performance has been highlighted by many as one of the best versions of Dracula on the big screen. Tom Noonan stars as Frankenstein's monster, who very quickly into the film befriends the kids and becomes part of their team. Tom was recommended by Rob Cohen and Fred loved him in Manhunter. Tom Noonan was a complete method actor, never being around the kids unless he was totally done up in the monster makeup. Jonathan Grise plays as the desperate man who turns into the Wolfman. Cole T-Bolt would perform as the Wolfman once he transforms. Jonathan has had a successful acting career working on film and TV. He is a fantastic actor, and one of my favourite roles of his is as Uncle Rico in Napoleon Dynamite. Makeup wizard Tom Woodruff Jr. would perform as Gillman. He had difficulty performing in a costume as he had a limited view of sight, as he would often miss his mark or accidentally hit one of the stuntmen. This was Tom's first credited acting role. He would often play as an alien or creature in many of the movies he worked on, where his team would provide the makeup effects. And last but not least, we have Michael McKay as the Mummy. This was his first acting gig like many others. He discovered the filmmakers were seeking a skinny actor for the role of the Mummy. Michael is often cast in movies due to his skinny frame. He would play as Bane in Batman and Robin before he turned into the muscle-bound villain. Most of you will recognise him as Jason, the son of Stryker, from X-Men 2. Shooting started in October of 1986. The production made use of locations in California and the backlot of Warner Brothers and Universal Studios. According to the director Fred Dekker, the film was cut by 13 minutes because some executives didn't want it to run more than 90 minutes. Thus we the audience ended up with a movie that ran just over 80 minutes, which is surprisingly short. When the film came to TV, it was extended by roughly 4 minutes, with additional scenes of dialogue, and some scenes were padded out. The film opens in the late 1800s with Van Helsing arriving at Dracula's castle. Helsing has discovered his arch-nemesis has a powerful amulet that controls the balance between good and evil. To defeat Dracula, he needs to use the amulet to open a portal, but the plan goes terribly wrong. It's later revealed Van Helsing's apprentices emigrated to the USA to hide the amulet, where it was out of Dracula's immediate reach. Jumping 100 years later, a plane carrying cargo encounters a problem. The pilot goes to investigate and is jumped by Dracula, who is on board, and after Frankenstein's monster. The cargo is dropped into a river in Louisiana, and Dracula chases after it. Not far away at a local museum, there are reports of a mummy breaking out of an exhibit, and the police are dealing with a crazed man at the station who claims to be a werewolf. The detective on duty is puzzled by these reports and finds them ludicrous. At the detective's home, his son Sean heads up his club called the Monster Squad. The club idolise classic monster movies, and Sean has heard some exciting news. He overheard his father talking about the crazed man and the mummy that escaped. Sean had recently obtained the diary of monster hunter Van Helsing, which he thinks is the key to helping them defeat the monsters, but it's all written in German. Sean, along with Horace and Patrick, go visit the scary German guy who lives nearby. Once he invites them in, they realise he isn't scary at all, but incredibly kind and sweet. He offers to translate the diary and reveals the power of the amulet. The balance of good and evil becomes vulnerable, and the amulet is the key to controlling the scales. Dracula has come seeking the amulet to tip the scales towards evil, so his children of the night can rule forever, and the kids have 24 hours to stop him. The kids discover the amulet is buried in a stone room beneath the house where the diary was found. Obtaining it won't be easy, as Dracula and the other monsters now occupy the house. As mentioned earlier, using the monsters from the classic Universal Pictures was out of the question, due to legal reasons, so they had to be creative to homage these characters to make them their own, and not just rip them off. They could only suggest the original designs. There was a certain percentage of changes that had to be made to get away from any legal copyright infringement. So they could do a gill man, for example, but it couldn't look too much like the creature from the Black Lagoon. Frankenstein's monster looks a bit like the Karloff creature, but instead of bolts in the neck, he has bolts in the forehead. Dracula has no Lugosi-esque widow's peak. The mummy didn't require that many changes, the artist instead made a more bony-like structure to the face, and the Wolfman has pointy ears and a face that Dekker describes as more Lupin than what Universal had come up with originally. Stan Winston put a lot of his own face into the Wolfman. There had been a number of werewolves on screen in the early 80s, for example The Howling and American Werewolf in London. This was a Wolfman, and his transformation was quicker as he expanded in size all in one go. Visual effects supervisor Richard Edlund headed up the visual effects, which have surprisingly held up well over the years, and are pretty impressive for their low budget. Of course, there are some wonky opticals here and there that appear washed out, with visible matte lines, which is always a problem with the chemical process of combining many elements photographically. The highlights are definitely the matte paintings to introduce Dracula's castle, the drive-in theatre seen from a distance as Sean watches the movie from the roof of his house, and not to forget the animated lightning effects, which Boss Film was so good at. Perfect examples being Ghostbusters and Big Trouble in Little China. The best effects in the movie is clearly the monsters, and Stan Winston's team did a fantastic job to homage these iconic characters of cinema. My favourite easily being the Gill Man, who sadly doesn't get much screen time, but when he's on screen he looks perfect. It's a shame they didn't put out any action figures at the time, because he would have been a great addition to one's collection as a kid. Fred Dekker was looking for a composer who really understood his passion for orchestral dramatic music, which he felt was missing in Night of the Creeps. After watching the film Silverado, he felt what he heard was the next wave of composers to come along, and that was the highly talented and underrated Bruce Broughton. Bruce had only done a few features at the time with the likes of The Prodigal and The Young Sherlock Holmes. Bruce started out his career mainly focused on TV, working with limited budgets. Broughton knew Decker wanted something epic, and also menacing that captures the sound of the classic horror movies, which Broughton never watched as a kid, but knew the sound he needed to replicate. He made attempts to not play the score for comedy and keep it menacing to maintain the horror, but it also has the classic gothic romantic sound to it that blends so well with horror. He also complements the music with a sense of adventure for the young kids who seek out to defeat the monsters. The score never came out at the time on LP and cassette tape. It wasn't until 2007 that Intrada released a score for the first time, comprising of 22 tracks of music. This CD was produced in limited numbers like most soundtrack releases today, and quickly went out of print. Thankfully in 2015, La La Land Records put out a new release remastered from newly discovered quarter-inch master tapes. I managed to grab hold of this version, which contains more tracks of music, mostly alternative cues that didn't make the film, and the songs Rock Until You Drop and Monster Squad Rap. With Bruce Broughton composing, you know you are in safe hands. The score to Monster Squad is a great throwback to the classic horror movies. He captures it wonderfully and provides contemporary writing of the time, so it doesn't feel dated in its sound. There's no cheap synthesizer sounds deployed into the score, which you tended to find with horror movies of the 80s due to their low budgets. Thankfully, the majority of the Monster Squad is classic orchestral music. If you want to grab a copy, it's still available online and is currently for sale at $20, a pretty good bargain. Now available to pre-order is my latest documentary, The Untold Story of No Retreat, No Surrender. I spent the past year working on this. I'm really proud of it. It was a lot of fun putting this together, and I'm excited to see it finished and finally coming out. It details the making of the film when Hong Kong action met Western filmmaking, with interviews with the cast and crew, plus contributions from some of the best action stars of the genre. We cover Bruceploitation, the shooting locations, the sequels, and the film's catchy soundtrack. The Blu-ray is limited to 1,000 copies, it comes with additional special features, and it's region free. Visit returnofclassics.com to grab your copy.
No retreat, no surrender.
The Monster Squad was a movie I never knew about growing up, which may surprise some of you. I only discovered it probably a decade ago, when I was looking into Fred Decker's career as a director after he fell off the radar due to the box office failure of Robocop 3. As the Monster Squad was rated a 15 in the UK, it certainly wasn't shown on TV in the afternoon, and if I had seen it on VHS as a kid, I wouldn't have been able to rent it, so this plays into how the film was received at the time and how it struggled to find an audience. This has been discussed before in other reviews, articles, and also the director has highlighted its struggles in finding the right audience back in 1987. With it being a kids' horror movie, it wound up being too scary for them, but also too tame for an adult audience. Certainly in the USA, once it hit video, it became this cult classic that has a strong fan base to this day. But for the UK movie fans, I do believe it went under the radar for many, so for me watching this now, I'm viewing it as an adult and don't have that nostalgic connection to it. But I must stress that I got a lot of enjoyment out of it despite its glaring problems. It was quite clear that the story does have a number of plot holes that makes the narrative a tad incoherent. A number of scenes don't really connect, and you get the impression that things have been cut or things haven't been made entirely clear in the script. How Sean gets hold of Van Helsing's diary feels like a throwaway piece of dialogue. His mother says she grabbed this book from a garage sale. The scene is executed without pushing its importance. You could miss it and suddenly be a bit confused how he got this book. Dracula and how he knows the location of the book and how it came into the possession of Sean is not made entirely clear. It's like the movie is 2 steps ahead of the audience. Why is Dracula leading this team of monsters? We, the audience, aren't told of their connection. We are only told of Dracula's goal to get hold of the amulet. Often throughout this movie, it's left to the audience to fill in some of the blanks. If you're a fan of these classic monsters, then it would make sense for Dracula to lead them, and his charisma gives you the strong impression that he is in control of this mission. There is a kind of odd moment where we see Sean's mother leaving his father. She is packed up and ready to go, then suddenly she finds Dracula outside the front door. We do see some friction between Emily and Dell, but never get the impression that things have gotten that bad. I just think overall the backstory and motives of the monsters and the importance of the diary and the individuals who escaped to the USA to hide the amulet should have been fleshed out more. Maybe those moments were given more screen time in the original cut before it was trimmed down, but in its current state it feels very much lacking in key areas. Those are the issues I have with it, but everything else is wonderful. Fred Dekker makes great use of the CinemaScope format, things are beautifully framed and lit, The opening sequence set in the 1800s really captures the magic of the old horror films. Some of it seems more in line with Hammer horror pictures in places. Dracula's chamber beneath the castle clearly paid homage to the 1930s Universal adaptation, and the action is executed in a slick way that makes it such a great action set piece to kickstart the film. Honestly, I would have loved to see more of this. When we jump to the 1980s, we are introduced to these kids who are instantly likeable. The kids talk like teenagers, they swear, they insult each other, some cases very un-PC dialogue, but this is the 1980s and also kids and teenagers talk like that for the most part. They want to act and talk like adults. They are very impressionable. I think the film captures their banter very well. What makes movies such as The Goonies and Stand By Me work is that the directors really bring across the chemistry that makes these kids relatable, and the same goes with the Monster Squad. The kids are portrayed as outcasts. Horace is bullied for being overweight, Sean and Patrick get in trouble for not focusing in class and are spending their time drawing monsters, and Rudy doesn't seem to fit in with the teens of his age and decides to hang with the nerds essentially. My favourite character is easily Phoebe. She shows less fear than her older brother and his mates. She swears a lot, which is always amusing. She befriends Frankenstein's monster and saves the day at the end. She is really the hero of the piece. As we've seen with many filmmakers inject their own passions for genre cinema, the kids all love monster movies, especially the lead character Sean, who has zombie and Godzilla posters in his clubhouse. The young kid Eugene has a Spider-Man poster on his wall and Incredible Hulk wallpaper. This is a perfect example of a 1980s kid's bedroom, unlike Stranger Things where they have the Evil Dead and the Thing poster on the wall, which I always argue is a warped perspective on 80s pop culture. Kids don't have an Evil Dead poster on their wall. Most cases they would have had something Star Wars or superhero related. The movie also plays into filmmakers' obsession of the 50s and 60s, with the older kid Rudy wanting to look like a greaser. Directors Joe Dante and Robert Zemeckis, just to name a couple, all had that love for that 50s period, where today people look to the 80s for inspiration and nostalgic imagery. One of my favourite moments is seeing Sean trying to persuade his father to go watch the movie Groundhog Day Part 12, which he knows is rubbish, and his dad is surprised there's another sequel, and they have this chat about the villain always coming back, returning from the grave again. His father says he can't take him to the drive-in as he needs to spend time with his wife, and is willing to take him the following night. This is a nice moment to show that Sean and his dad share a common interest in movies. Fred Dekker clearly injected some of his own experiences as a kid into the script, as his father was a movie buff and took him to the drive-ins. In the film, despite his father having a stressful job and difficult relationship with his wife, he joins his son on the roof to watch the movie from a distance, and that brings them together. The end battle in the centre of the town as the kids come face to face with all the monsters is a great sequence to end the film. Seeing the Wolfman explode and then reform is all very well done, and it also demonstrates the Monster Squad facing their fears and being able to take down these creatures. Once the portal opens and we see Frankenstein and Dracula get taken away, Dracula gets grabbed by Van Helsing and gives Sean the thumbs up. Man, I pissed my sides with laughter when this happened. It's charming and cheesy, but didn't really make much sense. We don't see Van Helsing get pulled into the portal at the beginning, as it cuts to present day before we see what happens to him. Obviously he must have got taken into it and has been waiting to get revenge on Dracula ever since. And with Van Helsing not being on camera since the beginning, it does feel so random when he turns up. The army arrives just shortly after the portal closes. Eugene sent them a letter earlier that day delivered by his dog of all things, and somehow the letter got to them and they arrived too late to help. This movie kind of throws logic out the window, but I'm willing to forgive a lot this movie does because it made me smile and laugh throughout. It's very rare for a movie to take all these classic monsters of cinema and put them all together into one story and for it to work. We've seen Universal Pictures try it with Stephen Sommers' Van Helsing, which I think is a great concept but badly executed, and their attempts at a dark universe completely fell through due to the disastrous results of the remake of The Mummy. Over 30 years ago, Fred Dekker pulled it off for the most part, and I find it puzzling why it's so difficult to do it now. The Monster Squad is highly deserving of its cult status. It's certainly Fred Dekker's best movie out of his small catalogue of features. Despite it not finding its audience on the big screen, it undoubtedly found it on home video and TV, where the younger viewers who it was very much aimed at finally saw it and appreciated it for what it was doing, and it struck a chord with them. It's certainly not perfect in its storytelling, but I can put those issues aside because it really celebrated these classic monsters and made the kids thoroughly enjoyable to watch, and with Bruce Broughton's rousing score and the combination of Stan Winston's creature effects, it just works on what it's trying to do. It's a great piece of 80s pop culture, and despite me not having a nostalgic connection to it, ultimately it didn't matter. Highly recommended, and I can safely say The Monster Squad is still the best movie to date to bring all the classic movie monsters together. Hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to click the like button and hit the bell to be notified of my latest reviews. Big thanks to my patrons and YouTube members for supporting the channel. If you want to get involved and gain access to exclusive videos and take part in Q&As, follow the link below.